it was funny because we had this program and it was just bring your favorite theater stories. And almost every single one was about something going wrong and how we got out of it. And everybody loves those stories, right? And you even love them as audience members, just watching how are they going to get out of this one? Anne's nodding. Nice. Welcome. I see our artistic director is joining us. Hello, Ms. Lisa Millette. Welcome, welcome.
Hello, I'm sorry I was a couple of minutes late. I was trying to get dinner on the table. Hi, Lily. Thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure. My pleasure. Rebecca, what you were saying about what happens or how you get out of it when something goes wrong in a theater during a show, you're giving me an idea for maybe a feature I should do.
I'll send you a link to our show because there were some fun stories. But yeah, we didn't even plan it that way. I think my favorite one, my husband has a story from when he was working crew and he was way up high in the rigging and he dropped a cookie into the lap of an audience member far below. And I always wonder what that woman thought when an Oreo just fell and landed in her lap.
Right on, free concessions.
I know.
To be clear, we all had cookies, though, given to us by the stage manager, so it was a sanctioned event.
Okay, I didn't even know you were here, Ron. Welcome. Are you upstairs?
I'm always watching, always listening.
Well, this is going to be fun tonight, I can tell. Thank you all for being here on a Sunday night. My name is Rebecca Wallace, and I am the host of The Next Stage. I'm also the marketing director here at City Lights. But in this very strange time, I've also been running this online series since April. Hello to all of you who are here tonight, and hello to those of you who will be watching this later on YouTube. We put recordings up of all these shows later on YouTube for everyone to watch, and the programs are always free. So tonight, I am very excited to welcome Lily. Oh my God, I never asked you how to pronounce your last name. Janiak, right?
Yes, that's it.
Yes, God, I'm a natural. Lily Janiak. This is one of these times when you realize you've never said something out loud, but you only wrote it down. Lily is the staff theater critic at San Francisco Chronicle, has been so since 2016. And prior to that, her writing has appeared all over the place, from HowlRound to Theater Bay Area, Village Voice, American Theater Magazine, SF Weekly. And would you post the link to the YouTube page, please, says Cindy. Yes, Cindy, I will do that a little bit later on once we get farther in. I'd be happy to do it. You can watch all of our past programs there on City Lights YouTube. And you're very welcome. And Lily has a super awesome, deep background in theater. I wrote this down so I don't forget. She's got a BA in theater studies from Yale and an MA in drama from San Francisco State. She has been a playwright, a director, a dramaturg, and not only a theater critic, but she's also a full-fledged arts journalist writing news and features about the arts world as well. So she's extremely well-rounded. Welcome, Lily.
I should say the playwriting, directing days are long gone, but it's nice to be reminded of those memories. So thank you.
You're very welcome. Well, the thing is those of us who are in the theater world, not all of us can be theater critics, and not all theater critics have such a deep and varied theater background. And so I think that's important to single out. So why don't you, so tell us, why don't you start off? So I've got some questions for Lily. I'll start by chatting with her. It's like in conversation with Rebecca Wallace, and we'll have plenty of time for audience Q&A. If question ideas come to you while we're talking, feel free to throw them in the chat and we'll make sure we get to them later. And welcome. Lily, why don't you just start talking about your theater journey? What got you into theater in the first place? Did you expect you'd end up as an arts journalist? Tell us about the path.
I was always a theater lover. Also, shout out to Steve Collins, who has joined Penn. It's great to see you both. I miss you and being at NCTC. But
you're heartthrob, Lily. You're a heartthrob.
Well, back to your question, Rebecca. Sorry. So I just knew that theater was magic from the first I can remember. My grandma had a staircase and that had a little window in it. And from my earliest memories, I just thought, that is a stage. And so I would force all my cousins to be in little like variety shows with me and perform for all the aunts and uncles every Christmas, every holiday get together. And that from there, I was stuck in this world. I took every theater class I could. And in college, I sort of tried to say, okay, what if I didn't study theater? What if I was maybe a history person instead? But I think even then, I always knew it had to be this art form that is unlike any other. It's just such a wonderful flight of fancy for the imagination. You can do things in theater that are so simple. I think of the play Eurydice. You can build a room out of string. That's in the stage directions. And something like that would look totally dumb in a movie. But in theater, your mind fills in the rest of, I guess, what would be around the room. And that simple act feels kind of sacred and like alchemy in a way. So I thought about straying, but I knew all along. And I didn't really find my path right away. So many of my fellow theater majors in college knew they were going to be actors, knew they were going to be directors, but I have like no control over my body. So acting ain't gonna happen. Directing, I have very little visual sense. I'd show you the rest of my apartment here and you'd agree. Playwriting, I can only really write in my own voice. And so that kind of didn't leave me with a ton of obvious options. When I moved out to California, I was assistant directing a play at Marin Theater Company, and they will always have a big soft spot in my heart for letting some, I don't know, ignorant kid come and not get in the way too much, hopefully. But I was getting a ride home one day from the actor Julia Brothers, who I think is a brilliant comic actress. And everybody in the car was talking about what's your next project? You know, the way folks in theater do, they're always looking to the next gig. And I didn't have anything and I felt completely lame. And I distinctly remember Julia up in the driver's seat looking at me through the rearview mirror. And she said, well, ideally, what would you do next? And I said, be a theater critic. Which maybe I hadn't really articulated aloud that much before. But then her response was, oh, I can make that happen, which was amazing. And she did. She happened to know the editor at the San Francisco Bay Times, an LGBT paper. And she put me in touch. We went to a show together. He thought I seemed like the kind of person who could maybe adhere to a deadline. Then the next show we went to together, we both wrote reviews just in case mine wasn't any good. And from there, I guess the rest is history. My first review I ever wrote is actually really embarrassing to read now, because I did the most like recent college grad thing ever, which is, it was a show at NCTC, which Ken and Steve know very, very well. It was like a 2-person lesbian cabaret, and with like very silly costumes, very silly lyrics. But in my review, I cited Aristotle's Poetics. I feel so dirty for admitting that. But something about forcing yourself to reckon honestly with how you felt about a work of art and what it tries to do and what it accomplishes. That is a thrilling thing for me. Maybe it's that I'm an excessively introspective person, a navel gazer, but I just really love asking myself, okay, what did I think? What made me think that? And how can I kind of wrestle that impression into an argument?
And you feel that that gives you a deeper appreciation of what you've seen, it sounds like.
I mean, I think most people walk away from a work of art and say, did you like it or not? And I guess for me, when it's maybe not a work of theater, maybe when it's a work of visual art, for example, which I have much less of a vocabulary for, I think that tends to be the level at which I experience it. But I think when you really, I hate to use the word force myself, but there is a little bit of that. There's a resistance. There's a bit of digging you have to do. I think it opens up things in your brain that you didn't even know you thought.
Ooh, I love that. It's interesting. I have a background as an arts journalist as well, and seeing a show as a critic and seeing a show as an audience member, I really find are two completely different things. If you're going to see a show and you're not working, do you still have your critic brain on? I mean, do you feel a difference between the two?
I can't help but have the critic brain on now. And I don't see very many shows just for pleasure. And even if I think I am, I start to want to take out the notebook and jotting things down. I start to see a story I could do here or a way this could fit into an existing story. So I mean, my predecessor, Robert Hurwitz, in the before times, I still saw him at opening nights all the time. We're in touch pretty regularly. I still see him take out his notebook, and I completely understand that mindset does not go away just because you're not on deadline anymore.
I can see that. I like your phrase, the before times, because I wrote in ordinary times, but I actually like the before times better. I want to know about the life of a theater critic, of your life in the before times. You must get tons of press releases. You must be following tons of companies around the Bay Area. And how do you choose what to cover? What kind of things are you looking at? I mean, that must be one of the hardest parts of your job, is how to choose what you can cover and what you can't. And how do you do that? And how many shows do you see every week? I
hate saying no to people. I have to do it all the time. It's so like these worthy projects that I would love to see, that I could see a profile on this person involved, or a feature on how this project represents the culmination of this trend as of late. I mean, and then I can't write anything at all about the show because I'm just one person, and you really would need at least 3 people to do the entire theater scene in the Bay Area justice. Maybe I won't say do it justice, but like begin to be comprehensive. It is really hard to resist the urge to like try to be comprehensive. But I am a union employee. I'm only supposed to work 40 hours a week, and I tried as my darndest to honor that. I guess I found that I could review 3 shows a week and be writing critics picks and a Q&A here and there, a column every other week, and also be kind of doing like reporting for an offer for the front page. So that would be maybe my baseline, but it could be 5 or 6 reviews one week, and then it could be 1 review the next. So, but 3 was maybe a target again in the before times. I would get home, maybe 11 o'clock at night, like most of you do when you're seeing a show. And my deadline's 9:30 the next morning. So I love seeing everyone's expressions whenever I say that, because I'm like, they get it now. My predecessor, Rob, he famously would come back to the Chronicle building and right there until 2 or 3 in the morning. He was and still is a night owl. If you are hoping for a response from him before 12 noon, you ain't gonna get one. But I try to live my life with, I guess I try to be awake with the land of the living, as maybe my mom would say. So what I do is I try to write my first paragraph or even my first sentence before I go to sleep, and then wake up at 6 in the morning and try to finish the review by 9:30. Doesn't always work out that way. And there is thankfully a little bit of wiggle room in that deadline. But I really like the pace of it. I wanted to be an academic for a while. I wanted to maybe get my PhD in performance studies or dramatic literature or something like that. But I love that when I finish a review and it gets edited, I instantly move on to the next project. I have a whole new project to work on every single day in the before times. And so that kind of means that if I feel like I don't hit it out of the park with any single review, you know what? I've got another chance in about 12 hours. So.
And each one you learn so much, because you have to be kind of a temporary expert at everything you write about.
Well, that is one school of thought. However, I also feel that I am the representative of the average audience member. And the average audience member often doesn't know much about the show they're seeing. Maybe their partner is dragging them along, or maybe they're a kid or an adult seeing Shakespeare for the first time, and they have no idea what to expect from Macbeth or Romeo and Juliet. So I really relish being able to be surprised along with my fellow audience members. So especially if a play is brand new, it's a world premiere, I will not read the whole thing first.
That was my next question. Do you prefer to be surprised, or do you do a lot of research in advance? That's interesting.
I love to be surprised. And just selfishly, that's one of the things that keeps the job interesting for me. And it's why I love theater. When a moment makes you gasp because it's perfect, it is just what the story needed, and yet you didn't see it coming entirely or didn't fully see it coming. So I guess if I knew everything in advance, I don't know, maybe I'd be a more informed or more expert critic, but I think part of the joy, I'd lose that, and I don't want to lose that.
That's a really good point, that you're seeing your role a lot like you're the average audience member, and you might be experiencing it for the first time. And that's such a valid viewpoint. I love reading reviews where the critic is just like, oh, I did not expect that. That really made an impression on me. Very cool.
But I should also say, I can't tell you how many productions of Hamlet I've seen at this point. So to some extent, that story is never going to surprise me in the same way that a world premiere does. So, but I mean, it would be foolish to try to equalize like every single show that I see, because that's not going to happen. But I can still see productions of Romeo and Juliet that surprise me. I saw one at Shakespeare Santa Cruz a couple of years ago now, where I was simultaneously dreading and like desperately wanting the ending and it felt new and propulsive, and it was almost as if I didn't fully know the story anyway. Yeah.
That's a huge compliment. You had an inkling it wasn't going to end well, but you weren't sure why. Interesting. I want to ask a little bit about too writing. We've talked about a lot of positive things. Writing negative reviews must be really tough for somebody who is as immersed in theater and as familiar as you are with what it takes to put together a show.
I would like to dispel the myth right here, right now, that critics relish the chance to write a critical review. I mean, I can't speak for everyone, but for me, it is usually torture. I'm not sure like how many hairs I pull out of my head in the course of, because it's both like, did I really think this thing? I have to be really, really sure that this is my honest opinion, and I'm not just like, I don't know. And then, you know, they're going to hate you. You know that these people are not going to like you. And as a Midwestern girl who was raised to be like a likable girl next door, and probably for most humans, that's just a really hard thought. So I guess I just, after all that wrestling, if I still emerge feeling good about the words on the page, that gives me a sense of, I don't know if this is too highfalutin a concept, but a sense of integrity. Like I feel like I'm doing the right thing in saying this, because a critic's position is unique. Nobody else is tasked with, I mean, perhaps you have friends as an artist who you can always rely on to be honest in their opinion of your show. But nobody else has to have the lack of conflict of interest. Nobody else has to state it publicly. Nobody else has to fashion a whole argument. And so to throw that like imperative away because you're afraid, understandably so, or because you want to be nice, it's just not the job you've taken up. You could go and be anybody else in the theater world and be that nice, supportive person. So I should say that I've had to kind of let some friendships, I don't want to say wither, but I've had to put them on the back burner, or not invest in them, not be as intimate with some theater artists who I truly do cherish. Because like the first time I wrote, and it wasn't even a critical review, it was like, this show is very good. This part was maybe a little bit iffy, but this show was very good. Even that was like very, very, very difficult for this friendship. And like having that conversation with that friend was quite painful. Oh. And I mean, it's fine. It's part of the job. And I realized after that, you know, maybe some other critics can have like very, very close friendships with theater artists, but I don't think I can, as long as I have this job. And that has to be okay. You know, I've got my stray cat friends out back. They're great. My husband's not a theater person, which is a big plus. My family aren't theater people. They're football people. So I've got some people who I'm probably not going to write a negative review about in my life. So there we go.
That makes sense. Before we move on, I've got a question here in the chat from Lisa, who wants to know, was it the performance or the writing? It sounds like probably what was the part that was not quite so good?
Oh,
Is that right? Did I have that right, Lisa? Yeah. Okay.
it was the writing.
That
And
makes a difference, right? I mean, if you're being an actor and a director and a theater leader, like it makes a difference. Is the critic commenting on the writing and the story, or the specific choices of the artist that is inhabiting that story? Or I feel like there's a difference. So I was just curious with the one that hurt you, or the relationship that was strained because of it. Also, the production values can sometimes come into it as well. I mean, there's so many different things to critique, and so many things to enjoy and love, and so many things to also put positive positive things out there for. But I mean, we're like theater people in our lives, like forever, right? So I know that sometimes it's one thing and not the other. So I was just curious, the one that you were just talking about, what was the thing that you felt like you had to say, this bit was not,
It was the writing, and my friend was a playwright.
Okay.
Playwright?
That'll do it.
Yeah.
That'll do it.
Thanks.
Was the author.
Thank you for answering that, because there's so many elements that go into it,
Right. And in any single production, I could walk away and go back home and write about this one moment of performance. Or I could write paragraphs about the costumes. Or I could write about how this lighting cue transported me to a whole other world. And choosing which things, that was a tough lesson early on, that you can't write about everything. And if you try to, your review will start to look like a laundry list. And as a reader, it starts to feel kind of boring. So I try to capture, like, what is that particular zhuzh I'm feeling as I walk out of a theater, like right as I step out? What is that like balance of humors inside me? And what is that one thing that I saw or felt that really sparked that? So that is often what I am like trying to figure out as I'm bicycling home from Union Square or on BART, is like holding on to that just stepped out of the theater feeling.
That's so good. That's so awesome to hear, Lily. That's so great, because really your job is to serve your readers, right? I mean, City Lights Theater Company serves our community. I mean, that's what we do. We are in service. And if you think about a critic's position as being in service, and in service to whom, then are you in service to the artists that are creating the work, or are you in service to the readers that are trying to choose what they might want to go see? And that, I'm sure, is difficult for you, but it seems to me you're in service, giving of your talents and your skills in service to the readers. So your honesty and your true thoughts are important to them.
I'm glad to hear you say that, in part because among artists, I find that there is a lot of, it feels as if artists wish I served them more a lot of the time. And
of course, we totally want that, but it's not realistic.
Right, but I have to serve the audiences. They have to be my top priority. Otherwise, you would be able to feel it in the writing after a while. It would start to feel like insular. It would feel inside baseball. It might like instead of a Chronicle theater review, you might feel like you were reading a theater trade magazine, which, you know, I'm writing for the guy in Novato who is only reading the arts section because his partner has the sports section. I want to write something that will spark even an iota of interest in him. I want to make him furrow his brow for a moment and say, well, maybe this theater thing is something I should pay attention to a little bit, or I'm going to remember the name of this theater company. I mentioned before that my family's they're not theater people, and I often keep them in the back of my mind as I'm writing. What would they get out of this review? What would they get out of this show? And my dad has started, after my urging, reading everything I write. And he will write back, sounds like it was a good show. And I love that. Or, whoa, I wouldn't touch that show with a 10-foot pole. And it's like, I'm glad you got that, Dad.
Wow.
I love this description of what you do, Lily. That's all so well said. So well said. Well, I want to move on, and Christine asked a question in the chat, which was just the question that I was about to get to. Thank you, Christine. And one of the things that Lily and I planned out was that I wanted her to talk about shows that she'd seen this year during this very difficult year that have really impressed her with their innovation, and also shows that she is looking forward to in 2021. And I pulled a few photos for the things that she's looking forward to. So why don't you start out by telling us about what your 2020 has been like, and what have you seen this year that's really impressed you?
Well, first of all, I should say that as the various huge breaking news stories have consumed the Chronicle, we've completely reshuffled who does what. For example, our pop music critic, he now is like our ace healthcare reporter. And you wouldn't necessarily think that a guy who's used to writing about Metallica over and over again would be so on top of what's coming out of the CDC. But there you go. So that's just to say that I've had to write about a lot more than just theater this year to help cover what needs covering. I've written about bookstores, I've written about movie theaters, I've written about stamps, I've written about conceptual visual art. And I wrote about a photography exhibit at a museum in Napa, where it was a photography exhibit about wildfires. And then right after they launched the online exhibit, both the photographer and the curator had to evacuate their homes. It was, so what I've written about this year, part of me is like, I want to be bringing attention to theater 24/7. I want to be reminding the public that this exists, that theater artists are still out there, they're hurting, or they're making something amazing, but the newsroom just needs me elsewhere. But what I have seen this year in theater, oh my gosh, in the before times, a couple of favorite shows were Gloria at ACT and Don't Eat the Mangoes at Magic Theater. It's really wonderful when you're sitting there on opening night and you've almost feel the canon of dramatic work expanding before your eyes, because you're like, this show, it's going to have a much larger life, and it's wonderful for me as a critic to be a part of that in some small way through the review I write. Then in the after times, one of my first favorite uses of Zoom was from this new company called Queer Cat Productions. And they did this show called Felix B. Love is Not Alone. And it was on Zoom like we are right now, but rather than being kind of a presentational, trying to replicate the experience of being in a theater, they really tried to use all the tools of Zoom. So like they sent us audience members into breakout rooms and gave us projects to do together. I think we all had to get costume pieces and put them on just from our closets and it just like was this wonderful, I felt like a little bit like I was at a party. And then when there was a bit of a more presentational scene, everybody in the chat was like, oh no, she didn't. Or like, I think they're in love, or just like, go Felix, you can ask her, you can do it. And it was a moment of community at a time when community is so hard to find. I really loved seeing Laura Jane Bailey's solo show, The Paris Effect. Before all of you joined us, Rebecca and I were talking about solo shows, and in part because of Mark Anderson Phillips' version of A Christmas Carol he's doing for City Lights right now. But I feel that the solo show is a medium that works really well in digital theater, and Rebecca was saying that has been her experience too. But if you think about a stand-up comedy special, it has higher production values and more cameras and better lighting, but is that really all that different from a work of solo theater on Zoom? So the translation feels a little more seamless, a little more natural. Two of the cooler projects I've seen though have been shows where I got to go out in the world. One was this piece called Neighborhood Stories, which was kind of like a drive-by scavenger hunt work of theater. So you would get your first location, you'd go in a caravan of maybe 3-4 cars max at a time. You'd see a 5 to 7 minute performance, could be a concert, could be a bit of clowning, could be a bit of spoken word. And then at the end, you'd get your next location, you'd drive off, the next group of cars would come. It was whirlwind and stressful. I'm not a frequent driver, so I'm not used to using Google Maps on my phone. I wound up just like asking another audience member, can I follow you? But I got to see 2 dancers on a balcony. Like they use their own balcony as their kind of outdoor stage. And just like that moment of looking up and realizing that these 2 people were making this magic just for this small group of cars. It felt like a really generous gift. And that's how a lot of the best theater feels to me. It's like a gift I'm almost not worthy of receiving, because what have I given in return? And then another one is by the Imaginists, who are up in Santa Rosa. And I do not mind making the drive or the bike ride or the bus ride to see them, because I always know it's going to be something that'll blow my mind, make me think about theater in a new way. They did takeout theater. So they turned their storefront into a takeout window. You have a menu on of 5 items you can pick from, 5 boxes. You choose one. It has a very poetic name, of course. And inside, in the storefront window, you can see all these chefs running around doing a like sort of interpretive dance or something very silly. There's lights and music, and it lasts for just a minute, like the time it would take to put a takeout order together. Then you get a box. It's your takeout theater. You take it home, and inside are instructions and fun little like props, or not like props like an actor would have, but like I got spools of thread and mahjong tiles in one. And then in another, there was a frog that had like a clay frog that had a piece of paper I unspooled inside. And you are supposed to make a work of theater, this box, and take a video of it and send it back to them. So that was just incredibly creative. And it, again, to talk about gifts, but it felt like Christmas, unwrapping a box and not knowing what's going to be inside and getting to play. I felt like a little kid again. So those have been some of my favorites.
That is so cool. I read the article you sent. At first I was like, takeout theater? I've got no idea where you're going with this.
Right.
How cool. It's really, it's so heartening to hear these different kinds of innovation and just people being so creative in these dark times. You also told me about 3 specific things that you're looking forward to in the new year, and I'll let you talk about them, and then I'm going to show some photos from those. So tell me what you are looking forward to.
Yes. So let's save Lauren Gunderson for the last, because I know City Lights folks are big Lauren Gunderson fan.
Love Lauren Gunderson.
As we all should be. And as the whole country is, because she's the most produced playwright in the United States of America 2 years in a row. So anyways, but let's first talk about this fun company called Oakland Theater Project. So I still have to get used to saying their new name, because they were formerly Ubuntu Theater Project. Just changed it this year. They have one site-specific piece coming up set at the, which I guess is no longer in use, but like the 16th Street train station in Oakland. And as we go through the site, there will be like light and video that will kind of tell us about the history of the station. And then they have this space that's a garage on the side of a flax store, an art supply store. And so that's like their main venue. And in the coming year, they're going to be using like a parking lot nearby to do drive-in theater. So I don't know how many cars they're going to be able to accommodate at once. Not that their garage was super capacious either. I don't know how we're all going to be able to see the one actor. So the first show in that format is a one-woman adaptation of The Wasteland. I don't know how, I think the sound is going to get to us like through a radio station, just like if you were at a drive-in movie theater. But I can't wait to see how they figure this out. And the actor for that one is Lisa Ramirez, who's just, when I saw her as Blanche in Streetcar with them, her entrance, I think I gasped aloud, because even then she seemed so breakable. It was like one of those moments where in an entrance, you can already see how the whole play will unfurl. There was that much packed into that moment. So that's them. Then another thing I'm really looking forward to is this show called Animal Wisdom at ACT. Now, I don't know much about it. I have never seen this artist before, Heather Christian, but it's described as a seance, and about like this woman learning her family history, her matrilineage, like traveling back as kind of a ghost story. And I really like when theater feels like something else, when it feels like a religious ritual, when it feels like a a journey, when it feels like a rite of passage. And this idea that theater could somehow summon ghosts, conjure ghosts, and make us all feel like we're together with the spirit world, that's really exciting to me.
Ooh.
And so then the last thing is, of course, Miss Lauren Gunderson, who has 2 shows coming up at Marin this year. And the first one is The Catastrophist. So this is about her husband, Nathan Wolfe, who is a renowned virologist and who, before the pandemic hit, was trying to sell big corporations around the world on pandemic insurance, and no one bought it. And
Whoops.
I mean, they're both super smart and just incredibly creative thinkers, and in totally different realms. I've interviewed them already about the show, and I loved hearing how they see their roles, careers as much more related than might meet the eye. Like Nathan was talking about how much creativity there is in science, and Lauren was talking about how much rigor goes into writing a play and storytelling. So I read the first half of the script. It's about Nathan's life and work and this big personal crisis he had. I won't give anything away. It's really good. It's really, really good. At least on the page, you know, and I don't know what happens in the end, but the first half was really fun to read. And I think it'll be a work of digital theater, but I think it will feel a little bit more just from the stage directions and what they ask audience members to do in advance. I think it will feel not super detached. So not too many spoilers there. And then at the end of the year, there's another Pride and Prejudice spinoff. This time she's going into the characters of Georgiana and Kitty Bennett, who become friends. So I just loved Miss Bennett. That was so much fun. I don't think I stopped smiling for like an instant the whole time I saw that show. And I'm a huge Jane Austen fan. It's really dorky. So I can't wait to see what that looks like. But yeah, not a lot of theaters have announced plans, understandably, because it feels like every time you announce something, you have to postpone, change, reschedule. But those are a few of the things I've seen that got me really excited.
Oh, that's great. Yeah, we at City Lights did the first 2 Christmas at Pemberley plays, Miss Bennett and the Wickhams, and just delightful. Yeah, and Kitty Bennett, they even had a line in Miss Bennett where they like, "Where's Kitty?" Or Kitty she's not even here. Like
a little bit of foreshadowing.
Yeah,
The possibility for the 3rd in the trilogy.
Oh, that's terrific. I've got a few photos here from what we were talking about. Let me just pull them up here. So this is Nathan Wolfe. Can you all still hear me with this image up? Yeah, good. Yeah, so this is Nathan Wolfe. This is Lauren Gunderson's husband, the virologist, and there he is being featured in Time magazine.
And he was on the cover of Wired this summer. And it's a great story about him and his company trying to convince the world to get pandemic insurance. I'd recommend.
Fascinating. Yeah, so that's The Catastrophist at Marin Theater Company. And then you're talking about Heather Christian, who is at ACT, and there's a picture of her, and then also her show that is kind of like a seance. That's her in it, written about in the New York Times. And it was very fascinating. She's Southern, I think. There's a lot of Southern imagery and such. And then I also pulled the Oakland Theater Project season.
Wow.
And I'm fascinated by the site-specific one that's at the train station. I think that's super cool.
St. John.
Yeah. Yeah. I was telling, whoops, I've got that one still up. I was telling Lily when I had asked her to give me some names of things that she's looking forward to. At first, I thought it was going to be a lot of, well, they're probably going to do this if we can gather again, and they might do this. And then I realized all the things that you had sent me are going to happen. They're COVID proof. And it made me feel very optimistic, and I'm getting goosebumps, but it just made me feel really happy. Obviously has not been the easiest year. Oh, this is great. I'm going to go through the chat right now. I know there's some questions that came up that we haven't all answered yet. So before I do, I know, and one of the first things I was asked was about our YouTube link. And what I'm going to share with you is, this is our series is called The Next Stage, and that's cltc.org/the next stage. And that's where you can find out about this series. And on that page, there is a link that leads us back to the archives. So everything is in YouTube. Thank you for that question. All right, and I know that there was a question. I think somebody wanted to know where in the Midwest you're from.
I was born outside of Detroit, and then I spent, let's see, my first 10 years there. Then I moved to Nashville, lived there until I was 16. And then I did the last couple years of high school in Fort Worth, Texas.
All over the place.
Wow.
She really got around.
Yeah.
Now, Ken and Steve, I know you know them. You mentioned, what theater company did you work with them?
Oh, Ken and Steve are very loyal audience members at New Conservatory Theater Center.
How cool. Thanks for being here tonight. That's great. Looking in the chat, I see there's a question from Vanita. Oh, welcome back, Vanita. She wants to know, do you think we're doing a good enough job of representing the diversity of our demographic in the theater world? Big question.
Oh man, Vanita,
I know.
you asked a big question.
Sorry, I didn't mean to complicate your...
No, it's a great question. And there are so many stories we haven't told yet on stage, and so many kinds of people who haven't seen themselves reflected in our theaters yet. And rather that can be a frustrating and saddening thing. And it shuts out audience members. It makes them feel like this art form isn't for them. On my good days, though, I can see it as an exciting thing, because it means theater still has so many things it can do that it hasn't done before. And it's my job to try to look for the narratives that I've never seen, the ways of interacting with an audience or with a community that I haven't seen other theater companies do. I don't know if we'll ever fully represent our region or our community, because I think it's changing and evolving faster than we theater people and we theaters can keep up with. But that's a wonderful thing. And it gives us so much, again, on our good days when we're not frustrated by it, it gives us so much to be inspired by, so much to spark the imagination and storytelling faculties.
Well said. Well said.
Well, we
Lisa
certainly
has
have a challenge. It's nice to have a challenge, but it's definitely a challenge.
Yes. Yes.
Indeed. Indeed. We've got a question from Lisa in the chat. Lisa says, I have a tiny challenging question. Ooh, sounds like an oxymoron.
Okay, so actually it's two tiny challenging questions. Lily, we don't know each other very well, but I honestly don't put anything out there in the world that isn't coming from a place of love and positivity. That's just the way I am. But I have two really quick questions for you. And these are not to spark any negativity, but just to get your casual take on it. One is that San Jose is the 10th largest city in the country. And I feel like we get very little uh, we get very little press. I'm like, what's that word? You don't come out much. Like you mentioned Eurydice, and I City Lights did a beautiful production, and I'm not even sure if you saw it, of Eurydice by Sarah Rule that was bilingual. Maybe you saw it, and I'm making a little ASS out of myself right now, but I feel like we get very little any kind of anything, honestly, from the Chronicle. But we're the 10th largest city in the country and larger than San Francisco. And so any art that is coming from an area that is producing so much, whatever it is, I feel like should have a little bit more focus. And then the other little tricky question, and you can answer both or neither or whatever, because seriously, it's coming from a place of love. I just wonder, because I love Lauren Gunderson so much. We've done 6 of her shows. I will produce anything she ever writes, even if it's on a napkin. But I'm wondering about you and Lauren, and I know you can't speak for her, but you're 2 women that I look up to so very much. And Marin Theater Company has been through some, there's been, we know Thomas and Sally, and there's been so much pushback on that organization. And you 2 seem to be kind of connected to it in a way that is not just in a more meaningful way. And I wonder, has that been difficult for you? Has that been challenging? I know they want to change. I know Aldo Billingsley joined the board. Like I know that there's movement there, but I wondered if it has been hard for you to have such an allyship with an organization that has had such backlash in the community. So 2 kind of challenging questions. Sorry, they come with love. I mean, from love.
I love it. This is great. With Marin, one interesting thing is that, I don't think this would surprise anybody, but most of the folks I worked with there, when I was there in 2009, aren't there anymore. So that has given me some distance that allows me to feel like, first of all, it's a little bit easier to write reviews of them. But then with all the backlash they've faced, I feel for everyone involved. I feel for the theater company, and I feel for the people who are taking the theater company to task. And I definitely don't feel like I can speak for Lauren's relationship to them. And I'm frankly not sure how they're going to emerge from all the turmoil they've been through. Like, it feels like something, they need to take some big step. So, and I'm not sure what that is. I mean, I'm not a leader and I don't have that kind of visionary way of thinking. But I think everybody in the theater community has kind of a weird taste in their mouth with Marin right now. And I think Marin knows that. And yeah, sorry to not be able to say anything.
No, it's so hard. It's so hard. I mean, I'm a colleague, I feel connected to our community, our theater making community. And I completely understand what you're saying. It's like, it's so hard and there's so much compassion and understanding, but we also have to be honest about what's out there in the public. And I'm not sure what the answer is either. And they do great work, and there are such good people that work there, but there has been so many missteps in the community, like but
Right.
I too want every arts organization in the Bay Area to thrive. So I have so much compassion and want to support. And so I understand you're not exactly knowing what to say, because I don't know what to say either. So I'm just,
Yeah, it's a struggle. I guess enough time has passed for me that it doesn't feel, or since I work there, I mean, that it doesn't feel super personal. Like I always have a soft spot for them, but I wouldn't say that that's like prevented me from, I don't know, trying to cover them in as honest and as righteous a way that I can. And then with your other question about San Jose, oh my God, you are so right. And I wish that I were 3 people. I wish that I could cover all the exciting shows by all the companies. But when Center Rep is calling, and when you guys are calling, and San Jose Stage is calling, and it sometimes I feel like all I do all day is say no. And it's really hard. I don't like it at all. It might be even worse than writing critical reviews. But for the right project at the right time in my own schedule, I like City Lights could absolutely get in the paper. And, when Rebecca, when you and Lisa think you're doing something really special, I know you'll let me know, and we'll try our darndest to work something out.
Oh, Lily, you're so gracious and sweet. And I did not mean that to be like hey, you don't give us enough attention. Like, I seriously am looking at it. I was born in San Francisco. I live in San Mateo. I understand that certain areas bring more energy than others. I understand that the density of work in San Francisco and Oakland is so much higher that it has a natural perception of having more going on. I get all of that. And honestly, I hope I don't offend anybody on this call, but there's a reason I don't live in San Jose, even though I've run that organization for 20 years. I honestly just want you to know I did not mean that as like, hey, why don't you cover City Lights? Like, that would be so immature right now. I just meant, I'm still shocked that San Jose doesn't have the footprint that it should when it is the 10th largest city and there's that much money going in and out, and there are so many people that live there, and that might be San Jose's problem. Like, I just wanted to ask you, like, do you have conversations about, are we representing the regions equally or fairly? I've gotten to the point, and I've worked for City Lights for almost 20 years, and I've gotten to the point where I'm like, we're just not going to get San Francisco coverage, and nobody stress about it. It's not a big deal. Don't worry about it. It doesn't mean that we are less than. It just means that's not the way it's rolling. So my feelings are not hurt, and I didn't mean to put you on the spot. I was just curious about those 2 things that I knew were going to be sticky. So sorry, Becky, if I was asking sticky questions.
No, it's all good. And with, you asked if we like, are we covering the regions fairly? And I should say that is not how we think about our coverage. I think about what is the best story. I have a colleague at the Chronicle. Her name is Esther Mobley. She writes the wine, beer, and spirits coverage, and she's a fantastic writer, and I gobble up everything she writes. But a couple of years ago, she told me that her own philosophy of criticism, it's not like to review like individual bottles of wine necessarily, or even bars or wineries. The way she put it was, she wants to tell stories through wine. And maybe that doesn't sound like a mind-blowing thing to other people, but I was like, whoa, I don't feel like I do that with theater. I feel like I have my list of companies that I tend to go to most of the time, I pick which shows look the most interesting or new to review, but I don't know if I tell stories through theater. This year, I feel like I've started telling stories through theater more. And that's partly because I'm reviewing fewer things and doing more features, narratives, but that's really exciting to me right now, is to feel like a storyteller myself. And so when I did a story about the conceptual art piece that I told you about, it was a golden mailbox in Santa Rosa, and that tried to set out to honor the post office, and then the post office sent them a cease and desist order. And it was a hilarious and charming thing. The artists themselves also gave great interviews, but it's also it's so small scale. It's like this one mailbox in a park in this city that's way far outside where I'd usually cover theater. But the story was, I just wanted to find out why they're doing this and how they got the idea. And it ended up getting really well read. So I imagine that telling stories through theater, what is a good article that I want to read, will be motivating me, hopefully even in the after times, just to use a parallel to the before times.
I like that, before and after times. I was talking to somebody the other day and we were talking about the plague year. And I think before and after times sounds a little more uplifting than plague year. This is fascinating. I see another question in the chat. We are going to be wrapping up fairly soon, but before then, please, if you have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. There's a question here from Julie, who wants to know, what about the plexiglass idea for the audience? As soon as counties allow more than one actor performing without a mask, as athletes are doing regularly. I think you've written a little bit about plexiglass. Tell us what you've seen.
Yes, I have. I got to see, again, this was another company I wouldn't usually cover because they do youth theater. And I think it would be totally inappropriate for me to review youngsters performing, but they're youth musical theater company, and they're in the East Bay. And they were the first company I heard of that was doing in-person shows for a gathered stationary audience, but they separated, it was outside. They separated the audience, different pods from each other with plexiglass partitions. And then the performers all had masks, and they specially built the masks so that the microphone could fit underneath, and so that the mask wouldn't collapse and get breathed in when you were breathing in. So then the sound came out of speakers. So two funny things about this show. It was the 25th annual Putnam County Spelling Bee. Thing I did not predict is when an actor is wearing a mask and singing and the sound is coming out of a speaker, you can't necessarily tell who's singing. So I would be staring at this other actor, like adoring their beautiful voice, and just like, and then it slowly dawned on me that I should have been looking at someone else the whole time. I felt really dumb. But it was kind of a funny thing. And the other funny thing about that show, these plexiglass partitions, they had them weighted down. There was like a solid wood block that had like a stand, but it wasn't quite strong enough for the afternoon winds in Aquatic Park in Berkeley. So like towards the end of the show, the barriers kept falling on us. We'd have to like push them. And so like I'm sitting here writing notes because I'm going to be writing a story on this. And so I'm like, I've got an elbow, like pressing the plexiglass back, and I'm still trying to write. And then the audience member on the other side is trying to hold it so it doesn't fall. Not entirely sure that was the most COVID safe thing, but they'll probably reinforce them more if they do this again. But that was pretty funny. The pitfalls of plexiglass. Maybe that could be a feature if it becomes more of a thing.
And there's your headline too.
Exactly.
Interesting. Love it. Anyone else have other questions for Lily? Feel free to unmute yourself and just go ahead and talk or type something in. No. Is there one thing that you miss the most about live theater right now? I know that's a hard question.
Ooh, I was actually going to do a column on like all the little things that I'm really looking forward to again, like even just getting a playbill and flipping through it and the smell of the playbill, the sound of a ticket being torn. Sometimes I like to get to a theater really early. So if a show is starting at 8, maybe I'm there 7:20, 7:25, and I can be the first person in the space. So maybe there will be a few moments when it's just me in the house of the audience, and I can breathe in the air and kind of think of all the performances that happened in this venue in the past, and like listen for echoes of those monologues. I also just love that when you're in a theater, you're not supposed to be doing anything else. You're not supposed to be seeing if your boss emailed you or grocery shopping, and so I'm in the right place. My phone is off, and all I have to do is take in how it feels to be in this room and wait for the lights to go down. That's like my church and my meditative moment. I'm in heaven in those 20 minutes before a show starts. I can't wait to do that again. Oh my God, dying. Cannot wait for that.
I just typed into the chat. I think we all feel that. They put that beautifully into words. I think we all feel that.
Yeah, all we theater people, we all get that, I think. We know that there's something magical about a stage and a venue, the seats, the lobby, the marquee. I love marquees. Love marquees. Gives the night a sense of occasion. I feel like it's an event. I love declaring the title of your show for all passersby to see in lights.
That has been a challenge now. It's like, what do we have on the marquee? We've had a lot of just sort of uplifting things like wear a mask, wash your hands, we love you. But yeah, the marquee adds a sense of occasion. Lovely. Thank you so much, Lily. This was really, really interesting and really beautiful and a very revealing look into what your life is like, and also just such a tribute to this art form that we all love so much.
Thank you everyone for joining and for listening. It was nice to see other people.
Thank you, Lily.
Thank you, everyone. We are taking a break on our series for the next few weeks for the holidays, but we'll be back in January. So look us up and stay safe, everyone, and have a wonderful holiday.
Thank you, Lily.
Thanks,
Thank you
everyone.
so much.